من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بفضل الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله والحمد حقه كما يستحقه حمدا كثيرا. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. اللهم لعن ولا ظالم ظلم حق محمد وآل محمد وآخر تابع له على ذلك. اللهم لعن العصابة التي جاهدت الحسين وشايعت وبايعت وتابعت على قتله. اللهم لعنهم جميعا. ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير خلق الله أجمعين محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين، واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. I don't want to go into full details of what took place the day that the house of Fatima was attacked. But I just want you to know that the event that's in contention and argued took place only days after the martyrdom of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Now the thing is, what's questionable here, and you all have encountered the doubting Thomas that comes up to you and says, brother, let me draw this picture for you. Imagine you are at home, brother, and someone comes to your house and he beats your wife. What would you do, brother? What is your stance there? Firstly, what amazes me is the one that puts forth this hypothetical scenario is actually under the impression that the assailants had come to the house of Fatima and Fatima had opened the door and that Imam Ali was standing and watching as they were beating her and was ignoring it. No one says this, and no one has ever said this. This is a concoction that has been fabricated by those that want to twist the facts. The truth is, not only has the event taken place, but there are so many things that took place on that day. The problems and the contention we have are in the details of what took place and in the sequence that they took place. One of the biggest things they bring forth is the stance of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. They say, where was Ali's manliness on that day? Isn't he zealous? Isn't he someone that is protective of his wife? Then how could he allow all these events to take place? Another thing they say is, why did Imam Ali alayhi salam have asked his wife to answer the door when he knew that they were coming? If you look at the questions they put up, they're nonsensical. Why? Firstly, let's take into consideration they were in their home. And when you look at the house, is there anyone here that can tell me the dimensions of Imam Ali and Fatima al-Zahra's alayhim as-salam's house? Hold on. Is there any historian I want you to go research historical books and find me one historical book that says the dimensions of the house. Find me a book that speaks about how their house was structured. There isn't any accounts. But what I know, because we're logical people, is Banu Hashim were there in the house of Fatima. Az-Zubair was in the house of Fatima. Okay? Salman was in the house of Fatima. Abu Dhar was in the house of Fatima. Al-Maqdad was in the house of Fatima. Ammar was in the house of Fatima. There was that many people. Now, I want to ask you a question. He has all these men over, and his wife is there in that house. Are they all sitting in the same room? Think about it. Anyone, even people that mix in their day-to-day lives. If you have the boys over, there's 10 boys. They're at your house. Is your wife sitting in that gathering? Even if you mix on a day-to-day basis, it wouldn't happen. Imagine in the case of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. So he was never in the room that they came to. The door that they approached, he was not at that place. The other thing, as for Fatima answering the door, she did not get up to open the door. This is what people fail to understand. When she stood to go to the door, she stood up to turn them away. That was her stance there at this point. So anyway, when we look at this and look at the points that have been brought across, people try and examine things with their own agendas and their own understanding. If I ask you a question right now, if you were to meet a young lady that you become attracted to and you wish to marry, and you find all the right things about her, and you were told that this lady is 13 years old or 14 years, let's say 14 years old, because you have been raised in Australia with the prejudices that are in this country, you will be disgusted at the thought, because you've been raised this way. But if you were living in Germany, where you're allowed to marry a 14-year-old, you wouldn't be disgusted. If you were living in Portugal, where you're allowed to marry a 14-year-old, you wouldn't be disgusted. If you were living in Vatican City, where you're allowed to marry a 9-year-old, you wouldn't be disgusted. Because these are the values that have been implemented, and these are the values that have been spread in these regions. So everyone tries to analyze every situation with the tools that they have established through their childhood and growing up. So everyone says, oh, this point doesn't make sense to me. And who are you? This is a question. Who are you? Could you imagine you actually walked in and into a doctor's surgery, and he's giving you an opinion on something, and he says, you know, I'm going to prescribe these antibiotics because of the bacterial infection you got. Yeah, doctor, I think it's a virus. He's going to turn around and say, excuse me, are you a medic? Have you taken the Hippocratic Oath? Are you someone that has studied this field? And if you say no, and he says, all right, if you mind keeping your opinion to yourself, because you're not qualified to give me your opinion. And these people come forth and they give you their opinion on the event, not understanding anything. If you want to talk about being zealous and men, طبعا, because we don't have a word for ghiri, ghira or ghiri, the regard a man has for a woman, we don't have a word for it in English, so we use the word zealous or regard to women. Okay. If you are someone that understands the concept of ghiri, now you told me something. When Imam Hussein alayhi salam took the women in his family to Karbala, did Imam Hussein alayhi salam know that he was going to be killed in Karbala? Did he know for certain? Of course he did. And the narrations all say this. All narrations, all the sects of Islam say that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam had spoken of the martyrdom of Imam Hussein before he was born. All the sects say this. So he knew he was going to Karbala to do what? شاء الله أن يراني قتيلا. Allah Azza wa Jal wanted to see Imam Hussein alayhi salam in this state as a martyr. Then they say, Abu Abdullah, why are you taking the women folk? Why did he take the women? Where's his ghira? Isn't he zealous? Where's his manliness? He's taken his women to be prisoners. This is the same argument. Tab'an, this is the argument of the ignoramus. Why? Because the ignoramus speaks. You know, they say, a fool rushes in where angels fear to tread. The ignoramus always gives his opinion. He always knows. You ever watch when you were a child, you used to watch the Smurfs? And Brainy Smurf would always come out and give his opinion. And he was way off target, but he had to give his opinion. All the time, he'd give his opinion, and his opinion would be so detrimental, and eventually it would punish him before it punishes anyone else. And these are these people, they give their opinion right at this point. So they say that, where was his courage? Why didn't he respond to them? Let's take a look at Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam's courage in this point. Amir al-Mu'mineen is someone that we were raised reading and researching to be the epitome of courage, the epitome of bravery. When you wanted an exemplar of bravery and chivalry, there was nothing like Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. When we even think about the night where Rasulullah migrated, who slept in the bed of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, who other than Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam risked his life to protect the Prophet. So why would he, in their case, be afraid at this point? So they use this as an argument. They say he did nothing retaliatory. Okay, but let's take a look. If I want to use their same measurement, you read in the Quran what Musa alayhi salam says to Fir'aun. He says, I fled because I was in fear. Now, if I'm one of those people that have that literary disease, the ones that read the Quran and do tafsir as they go along, so I'd read and say Musa was a coward that would run away from danger. This is the way people would read it. But this isn't the meaning of it. Likewise, if I talk about Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, I would say that when he left Mecca to Medina, when he migrated, I would say, yeah, he ran because he was afraid. Why didn't he stand up to them? See, this is why it's not up to you and I to make these measurements. It's not up to you and I to decide what the law is. It's up to Allah Azza wa Jal. And this is why when we speak about courage and we talk about different acts when it comes to courage, we need to look at a few things on what courage actually is. Firstly, let's take a look at this verse where Luqman al-Hakim says to his son, وَاصْبِرْ عَلَى مَا أَصَابَكَ إِنَّ ذَلِكَ مِنْ عَزْمِ الْأُمُورِ. Luqman says to his son, and be patient over whatever may befall you. For this patience really requires courage. This is the way courage is required. When something befalls you, this is when you need patience. And to have patience is courageous. Why? Why would he say that? Because our nature as human beings is to react. You ever heard the proverb where they say, strike while the iron is hot? Where people want to react immediately. But this is natural. We always don't think, we act, and then we worry about the consequences later. For me to hold back, this is where courage is. When I see something that is more important. Now let's take a look, firstly, to get to this point, about Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. If you read the narrations, you know when you see the words, when someone speaks to the Imam and he says to the Imam, جُعِلْتُ fidak. It's a very nice word. Very nice words, I should say. جعلت fidak. May I be at your ransom. And in other words, may my life be put before yours. May I be sacrificed for you. Do you know who the first person to utter these words were? If you follow the narrations and you see the first person to say جعلت fidak was on the day of the Khandaq in the Ahzab, when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, just to give you an idea, so you want to know about the courage and the bravery of Amir al-Mu'mineen on the day of Ahzab, because after the Muslims had been in two battles with the mushrikeen, in the battle of Badr, and then they fought them in Uhud. The third battle, they had united the mushrikeen all together with they banded with different groups or parties, and that's why they call it Al-Ahzab, to finally give the Muslims a final blow and annihilate them. And they had recruited and acquired the services of Amr ibn Abduwuddin al-Amiri. And when you read history, and I want to tell you about history, I really want you to pick up Islamic history books and read about Amr. If you read about Amr ibn Abduwuddin al-Amiri. All Islamic historians from all sects, when they speak about him, his ability would dwarf the ability of Antar. He was known. Amr was known. The least I've heard of his prowess is one writer. This is the least praise I've read on him. The least is one writer says he was the equivalent of 500 horsemen. That was the least I've heard of him. The equivalent of 500 horsemen. One horseman equals 5 foot soldiers. So he was the equivalent of 2,500 men, according to historians, according to those that fought him. In fact, they used to say that people wished to be stuck in a pit with beasts or carnivores than have to fight Amr. This is the way people viewed him. And Allah Azza wa Jal, when He speaks about this in Surah Al-Ahzab, He tells you about the state of the Muslims. He says, وَإِذْ زَاغَتِ الْأَبْصَارِ وَبَلَغَتِ الْقُلُوبِ الْحَنَاجِرِ وَتَظُنُّونَ بِاللَّهِ الظُّنُونَ. He says at this point, if you look at these words, وَإِذْ زَاغَتِ الْأَبْصَارِ, you know that look of stun, that look of fear, where someone sees fear in their eyes and their eyes just sink in from that fear. And he says, and the soul reaches the what? Reaches the throat. You know when you lose the sound in your voice? He says this was the state when Amr had crossed the trench and came towards the Muslims. This was not the state of the munafiqeen, the hypocrites only. This was not only the state of the mu'mineen, the believers. This was not only the state of the mu'mineen, of the Sahaba, even the muqarrabeen, the near Sahaba were in this state of Amr. And it says here, the final part of the verse, وَتَظُنُّونَ بِاللَّهِ الظُّنُونَ, which means that you started to have these various assumptions, diversions, and you start thinking to your head, you know, is this religion really going to prevail? This is Amr. Are we really going to make it out of this? Are we really going to survive at this point? Are we the ones that Allah Azza wa Jal has made to be victorious on this day? Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad first. So they're in this state. And Amr comes across and says, "O Muslims, you speak about a paradise. That when someone is martyred, is killed, they enter this paradise. So he says, come one and all, I will send you to paradise one after the other. And he starts to mock them. And the Muslims, they're not changing. They're all in a state of fear. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam speaks to the Muslims. He says, look at this man who speaks about your faith. Is there anyone that will stand against him? At this point, Amir al-Mu'mineen stands up and says, Ana ya Rasulullah, I will stand against him. Now Rasulullah says to Amir al-Mu'mineen, sit down. There's a lot of opinions on this. I've read a lot of opinions. Some opinions say that Rasulullah said to Amir al-Mu'mineen, sit down, just in case someone says, oh, I was about to put my hand up, I was about to stand up, but he beat me to it. Or someone was saying, oh, I never heard. You know, if I heard, I would have stood. Some other opinions say that Rasulullah, and these are just like what I said, these are just observations on the written text. There's no proper reason that we know. Some say that Rasulullah didn't want Amir al-Mu'mineen to even encounter a man like Amr. They say that this is how much he cared for him. That there's all these varying opinions. So imagine what kind of a person Amr was when people would come up with these opinions. The narrations say at this point, when he said to them who will stand against him, they say everyone was so still as if they had a bird on their head. Like I've mentioned this previously, if you go to an auction, you know, they tell you don't move because any move could be a bid. If you raise your finger, it could be a bid. So they were all making sure that there's no way that they were going to put their hand up or stand up for this. So Rasulullah asked a second time, who will stand up to Amr? Amir al-Mu'mineen stood up again. And then Rasulullah said, sit down. One more time. Let's see who's going to get up. Who will stand and rise to this? At this point, Amir al-Mu'mineen's heart couldn't handle anymore what he was seeing. Because the state of Islam, this is the ghira. This is what Amir al-Mu'mineen was zealous over. His ghira was over Islam. His love was for this faith. He would protect this faith to death. And he couldn't stand that no one would stand up. And he said, جُعِلْتُ فِدَاكَ يَا Rasulullah. He was the first one to say this. And he says, then Rasulullah said to him, إِنَّهُ Amr. This is Amr. And he said, وَأَنَا عَلِيُّ بْنُ أَبِي طَالِبٍ. This is Amr that you're about to fight. Why would he say, إِنَّهُ Amr? جُعِلْتُ فِدَاكَ. The first one to say it was Ali ibn Abi Talib. May I be at your ransom. May I be sacrificed for you. Why did he say it at this point? Islam was at stake. The religion was at stake. This is why I used to read the ziyarah. Honestly, you read ziyarah, the shuhada of Karbala. Who are they? The companions of Imam Hussein. This ziyarah is recited by the Imam al-Ma'soom. And the Imam says to the companions of Imam Hussein, what does he say in ziyarah? بِأَبِي أَنْتُمْ وَأُمِّي. Who is the father of the Imam? An Imam. He says, may my father and my mother be at ransom. May they be sacrificed for you, the companions of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Why would he say that? Why would he say such a statement? Because there's something far greater than Imam Hussein. There's something far greater than Rasulullah. When you say Shahadat al-Maut, when you say the testimony of death, what's the first thing you say? Allahu Jalla Jalaluhu Rabbi. What's the second thing? Wal Islamu Dini. Religion's more important than everything else. In fact, it's so important that Amir al-Mu'mineen says, your religion, to hold firmly to your religion. He says, because a good deed, he says, because a sin with religion, listen to this, is better than a good deed without religion. He says, because a sin with religion might be, maybe, or will be forgiven. But a good deed without religion is not accepted. When someone does a good deed, they just do it for the heck of doing it. It's not accepted. If it's not done fi sabilillah, it's not accepted. This is the importance of the faith. So at this point, Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam has shown this position. Someone with this incredible amount of courage that you cannot even measure. Could you imagine how difficult for him it would be to practice patience? You think about this. Let's look at you and I. Let's not talk about anyone. It's you and I. You and I, how do we feel? You know the thing where we say safety in numbers. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, لا يزيدني كثر الناس حولي عزة. That if I had a huge number of people around me, it doesn't increase me in might. You know, when you're in a big group, you feel strong. It's normal. It's a human feeling. If you're at a rally, there's 10,000 people, wow, you can move a mountain. You run through everything. You're up there. You know, you feel that. Even when you're at a football game, home crowd advantage, that numbers behind you, it lifts a team. You feel the numbers, you can feel. Imam Ali alayhi salam says, لا يزيدني كثرة الناس لا يزيدني كثرة الناس حولي عزة. If I have a lot of people around me, I don't feel any mightier. ولا تفرقهم عني وحشة. And if everyone leaves me, I do not feel alone. I don't feel weak. I don't feel less. If this is someone that feels like this, you know, sometimes when you let a problem go, it could be either out of forgiveness or it could be because the problem's too big for you. You know, I'm not going to get into this fight. And the reason I don't want to get into this fight in my head is because this guy wiped the floor with me. But I don't say that to people. But imagine every situation in your hand is yours. This is how Amir al-Mu'mineen felt. And he says it in numerous narrations. And he proves it. He proves it not once, not twice, but multiple times. Whenever he went into a battle, he would not return except victorious. Ever. He would fight and he was victorious. No one could stand up to him. In fact, it got to the point where Amr ibn al-As had to expose his nudity so he wouldn't be killed by Ali ibn Abi Talib. In the battle of Siffin. This is what started to happen. And he says, وَلَوْ تَضَافَرَتَ الْعَرَبُ عَلَىٰ قَتْلِ لَمَا وَلَّيْتُ عَنْهَا. He says, if all the Arabs united to come and kill me, Imam Ali alayhi salam says, he says, لَمَا وَلَّيْتُ عَنْهَا. I would not have left a single one of them alive. This is the amazing thing with the Arabic language. Had he said, لَمَا وَلَّيْتُ مِنْهَا, it would have meant that I would have fought them all. I would have taken them on. But he says, لَمَا وَلَّيْتُ عَنْهَا, means I would not have left a single one of them. So this is when Allam al-Amini says, I did not know the courage of Ali in Badr. And I did not know the courage of Ali in Uhud. And I did not know the courage of Ali in Al-Ahzab, in Al-Khandaq. He says, Bal, I knew the courage of Ali the day they attacked his house. He said, because إِنَّ ذَلِكَ مِنْ عَزْمِ الْأُمُورِ. This is what requires courage. You want to know what courage is? Courage is when you stop yourself doing something that is easy for you. And Allah Azza wa Jal wants Islam to prevail. Regardless. We sit there and we listen, and when we were listening about the prowess of Abu al-Fadl Abbas alayhi salam, everyone hears about the stories of Abu al-Fadl Abbas and his ability on the battlefield. On the day of Ashura, Abu al-Fadl Abbas alayhi salam asked permission for what? Imam Hussein alayhi salam asked him, what would you like on this day? He says that my chest, daqa sadri. He said that, you know how you feel that confinement within. He says, I want to take revenge on these people, on what they have done. Imagine this is Abu al-Fadl Abbas. This is a man mountain. This is someone that people stand before his shrine and are awe. They know his ability. They deter to swear by his name. And then Imam Hussein alayhi salam says, no. You go get some water for the children. You don't go fight. Go get water for the children. And the narration says that when he went towards the water, he only killed 8 men to get to the water. He wasn't there to fight. He was there to fetch water. And all he was worried about was returning this water, being obedient to his imam. And his only concern when his right arm was severed was, even if you have severed my right arm, forever I will protect my religion, my faith. So what is paramount? Fatimiyyah al-Zahra or the religion of Islam? The religion of Islam. Salawatullahi alayha wa ala awladiha at-tayyibin at-tahirin. What is paramount is always Islam. What comes first is the religion of Islam. And Amir al-Mu'mineen in his khutbah, even he says what the reasons were. He says, وَطَفِقْتُ, after they took the khilafah. He says, وَطَفِقْتُ أَرْتَئِي بَيْنَ أَنْ أَصُولَ بِيَدٍ جَذَّاء أَوْ أَصْبِرَ عَلَى تَخْيَةٍ عَمْيَاء. He said, I began to think between two things. What? Do I fight? Do I go forward? Do I take to arms? Or do I endure this darkness, or this blinding darkness, he says, of tribulation? Which one? Do I endure? Am I patient with one? Am I patient, or do I fight? One of the two. What do I do? What is it that I must do? He puts himself in this stance. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So what does he do? He takes the next part of his sermon, the same sermon. He says, فَرَأَيْتُ أَنَّ الصَّبْرَ عَلَى هَاتَا أَحْجَى فَصَبَرْتُ. That at this point, he says that I found endurance and forbearance and patience was what? Wiser. So I was patient. He weighed up the situation. Either he stands and he fights, or he is patient at this. So the main thing that you need to look on this day, because I've heard a few adhans, so I'm not going to go on to the next point, is that what is paramount, although I don't think it's prayer time for a while. What, is it about 7 minutes or something like that? Yeah, but anyway, the main thing that you need to find in the situation is Allah Azza wa Jal makes a commandment and a test. And the servant of Allah, no, I should say the slave of Allah, be it Rasulullah or other, is obedient to the task put at hand. Even if that task is for one to kill their own son, as Abraham was tested. Allah Azza wa Jal tested him. And Abraham was not only Ibrahim, ala nabiyyina wa ali wa alayhi afdal salatu wassalam, was not only willing to do this, the narration says that he struck in the motion of dabah, yani dabah. But Allah commanded the knife to not cut. And at no point was he pulling back on the matter. At no point did he stand down on the matter. And when he told his son that I have seen in my dream that I have to take you and sacrifice you, what does his son say? He said, do as you have been commanded, and surely you will find me of who? Of as-sabirin, of those that are patient. This is where courage becomes paramount. Do not let people try and dissuade you, trying to use rhetoric. This is the biggest problem. Someone brings forth an argument, okay? Don't forget, you need to look at the counter argument. Doesn't matter who's, even after I speak to you. After I've spoken to you, my words aren't gospel. Go look at the counter argument. Counter what I've got to say. This is how you increase your knowledge. You need to know everything you hear, you take in. Counter everything. Read both sides. See what is right. Don't sit there and watch YouTube videos and live by them for the rest of your life. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to hasten the reappearance of our master Al-Hujjat ibn Al-Hasan Al-Mahdi. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma kulli waliyyika صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.